download. So, hey, okay, we're in record mode. Who knows who's seeing what, but at least we're seeing each other. And I see you. Hey guys, Steve Taubman here. Great to be here. And I'm here with my friend Ann Zuccardy. And I'm super excited about having you here, Ann. I was thinking back over the last several years. There was a period of time when we were spending a ton of time together, walking our dogs together, taking walks in the woods, and like really reflecting on life. And then you had kind of a change of life where you sort of did a move. And
Yeah.
I then had one myself. And so we both have spent an awful lot of time outside of Vermont.
Yes.
Um, but this is an opportunity for me to kind of catch up a little bit on what your life has been looking like personally, but then also kind of globally. And what, I think a lot of people are questioning is how do I deal with the circumstances I'm in right now? Can I be successful? Can I be happy? How do I navigate these waters? And I
Yeah.
thought, you're somebody who I think would be really good to talk to. For those of you who don't know Ann, she's a speaker and an author and a brilliant woman who has a great backstory that has led her to learn more about the nervous system and about intelligence and about how the mind really works. So from that perspective, I think we're going to have a really cool conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm eager to hear what you've been doing for the last couple of years too.
A lot of catching up to do. So let's start with you, though. I know that when you were here in Vermont, things started happening elsewhere. I think you were starting to move your life a little bit down to the mid-central part of the country.
Yeah, the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had an opportunity in 2017 to go to Maryland and teach at a community college there. And at the time, I was still working on my master's degree, which I've since completed. But they took me on, which is unusual for someone without a master's degree, but I had a lot of corporate experience, so that was nice. And I started teaching at a community college in Maryland. It's called Cecil College in Northeast Maryland. And I learned that I really loved it. I was an adjunct, which means that the pay wasn't great. But for me, having always been in the corporate world, it was just a nice change. I enjoyed it very much, and it really dovetailed nicely with the work I was doing in my master's degree program. So in 2019, the end of last summer, I finished my master's degree in English, and I now teach at two separate colleges. I teach at Cecil College and at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. And I do a lot of freelance writing and editing work, a lot of editing these days. I also speak still. I'm looking to do more speaking now that I'm not in school anymore. So I'm eager to ramp that back up again. But of course, right now, with everybody
We're both kind of shut
quarantined,
down.
being able to do that virtually is really important. So I'm doing a keynote virtually in Arizona next month for the Brain Injury Alliance of Arizona. I keynoted for them a few years ago. So this year I'm doing it virtually.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm also going to give a quick shout out for your TED Talk because you did a fantastic TED Talk about intelligence, about how, can a brain injury make you more intelligent? Or it was an interesting spin on the whole thing. Do you want to talk a little bit about
I
that?
will. So I actually did two TEDx talks. The first one was called How a Brain Injury Made Me Smarter. And the main idea behind that was to challenge traditional ideas about what makes people intelligent, because I had always measured my intelligence by my job, by the grades I got in school, by external measures such as tests and such, and I always did very well. And then after the brain injury, that wasn't the case anymore. I had a lot of challenges with reading, memory, lots of challenges. And I had to leave my corporate job, and that sort of turned my whole life upside down. So I learned to redefine intelligence in a new way. And that was, through creative adaptation, that ability to adapt, as many of us are having to do right now, through curiosity, and through our hunger to learn. So that was my first TEDx talk. And the second one was called How Being Unsafe Makes You Smarter. And what that really means is, by unsafe, I mean stepping out of our comfort zones, out of our safety zones, into what I call the safe unsafe, taking calculated risks. And these are all of the things in both TEDx talks are about neuroplasticity, and that whole idea that our brains can continue to grow and change and create new neural pathways for a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
30, 40 years ago, we thought differently. We thought that once your brain reached a certain point, that was it, you were done.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know differently. So I'm really into neuroplasticity, and I've also gotten into the study of humor, therapeutic humor, and how humor impacts brain health and learning. So I'm currently working on a book called Neuroplasticity. I
Oh,
bought the domain name. I have a
yeah.
publisher, and I'm working on a book called Neuroplasticity, 5 fun tips to build a better brain.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to reading that. And I certainly echo everything you're saying. I mean, with what I've studied and what I've experienced around humor and around mindfulness, and you use the word curiosity, how important that is. I'm working on a book now called The Power of Wonder.
Yeah.
And how does wonder, the ability to live your life as if every day is new, and kind of cultivating that experience of newness. Zen mind, beginner's mind is a great.
Beginner's mind, yeah.
Yeah. And then when you look at that and you bring it back to this concept of intelligence, the idea that intelligence is not a function of how much stuff is in your brain. That is, it's not about your knowledge, but it's not content. Knowledge
Yeah.
is not, but it's context. It's like, how are you framing it? How are you holding it all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so interesting. And that's one of the things I discovered when I was working on my master's degree in my mid to late 50s. So, I thought after a brain injury, it was going to be much harder because I have difficulties with reading and that haven't resolved, and memory difficulties. I thought it was going to be harder than my bachelor's degree was when I was, 20, and supposedly my brain was much more supple and, able to learn. But I found the opposite was true. I found that because I was doing this in my 50s and because I had so much life experience, I was able to compensate for the things I couldn't do because I was able to connect what I was learning to other experiences that I might not have had in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So, even though the reading part was difficult for me, the learning and the contextual part, the tying it to other experiences, it was so cool. It was really cool. I really surprised myself.
And also the willingness to recognize that, that I am a learning being. I am going to experience challenges.
Yeah.
I am going to feel frustrated by that, but I'm going to then rise above the frustration and keep on going. It's like the broader perspective that when you're younger, you don't really have.
That's so true.
When I was 14, I learned to play the guitar to some extent, and I got to a particular point, and it got a little hard. And as soon as it got hard, I stopped because,
Yeah.
like, why would you push beyond what's hard? As you
Yes.
get older, you're like, okay, I know I'm going to hit that point where it seems hard, but then I've got to revisit my motivation, revisit my purpose for doing this, and
Yes.
kind of play a little bit with what my obstacles are.
Exactly. And that's when neuroplasticity happens. I mean, when we do things over and over and we get good at them, then we create these well-worn neural pathways. So it's easy, right? It's like, a road with ruts in it. If you go, in those same ruts all the time, it's easy. But if you try and go a different way on that road, it's a little bit hard. So yeah, so that's exactly what you were saying, is about trying things that are a little bit harder. And the other thing too is, people, there's some stress going to grad school in your 50s when you're working, and there's stress in everything, right? But there's a good kind of stress, the stress that, inspires us to just push a little harder and improve. We need that kind of stress. And then there's the crazy stress that most Americans feel, that releases too much cortisol and makes us crazy and makes us feel overwhelmed and kicks the amygdala part of our brains into overdrive, and that just messes us up. But stress is not always bad.
That's awesome. I love that. And, it goes right back to what you were saying about your second TED Talk, how being unsafe makes you smarter. It's like, that's the stress you're talking about. It's that little bit
Yeah.
of, I'm stretching myself a little bit. I'm going to feel something, but that something is going to make me feel more alive. I'm going to be more present. It's like when you're driving down the road and you're driving a little bit over the speed limit, maybe you're keeping your eye out for the cops a little bit more. You're a little
Yeah.
bit more attentive.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I said in my second TEDx talk is that you have to be willing to go that extra mile and to look silly doing it sometimes, because when we're doing new things that are hard,
Yep.
we can look ridiculous sometimes. And I've certainly been criticized many times in recent years, for, oh, you can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, or you can't say that. And but you're going to get that when you try things that are a little harder and step out of your comfort range, or out of the comfort range of the people around you, the crabs that want to keep you in the crab bucket.
Well, one of the things that I love about you that, that's always been really kind of delightful is that you are comfortable like being a little goofy sometimes and like
Oh, heck yeah.
stepping out and not having to look good all the time. And I think that's a message for everyone, right? If we could all, like let go of this strong egoic demand to always like look good and come across a certain way, and like just be a little bit, give yourself a little bit of permission.
Yeah, well, that's why I love studying humor, because that's what it's all about.
Mhm.
As we get older, we tend to lose that childlike playfulness.
Yeah.
And I had a really good role model in my father. He died at the end of 2018, but he was the funniest guy I've ever known, right up until the end. I mean, we were just always laughing at him and with him. And we were just always playing. So I learned that from him. But one of the things I've noticed, especially in academia, oh my gosh, like humor is
Yeah, it's not
discouraged.
cool.
Heaven forbid you should be funny in academia, because people think you might think you're not a serious academic. And I just find that ridiculous.
Yeah, there are a lot of worlds where that kind of lightheartedness hasn't really pierced in enough to where it becomes normalized or anything.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
I'm curious now because this conversation about the lack of safety and stress and the how we respond to the experiences that we're in definitely speaks to where we are right now globally. Right, this is a stressful time.
Mm.
We're outside our comfort zone, probably further out than we ever wanted to be.
Yeah.
But how do we apply some of these lessons of curiosity, et cetera, et cetera? Like, what are you doing well, I was going to say, what are you doing to stay sane right now? But I haven't even asked, are you sane right now? But
Yeah,
once,
for the most part, yes. I mean, I've had my insane moments, and I think we all have, because we've never experienced anything like this before. And, just because I've experienced it before with a brain injury doesn't mean I'm an expert at it, because I'm human. And yeah, I've had my crazy down days too. But I think, the main thing for all of us is, this has been going on for a month now. So we're all kind of tempted, like, oh, I think I'll just sleep late. Oh, I'm not going to take a shower today. Oh, I can wear my pajamas that I slept in. And I think that's when we get into the danger zone, because I think, having a set routine sort of keeps us accountable. And humans need routines. It doesn't have to be rigid, but, I think for me, I go to bed at the same time every night. I get up at the same time I always did, before this happened. Every
that's
morning,
what, 1 o'clock in the afternoon,
I
right?
take plenty of walks.
1 o'clock in
Um,
the afternoon, is that when you get up now?
this morning I was up at 4 because I had papers to grade. But yeah, I think keeping a routine is important, and also not feeling like we have to be a certain way. I see all these people on Facebook, oh, I'm so productive, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I cleaned my closet, I cleaned my garage. And then I see the other people who can't even move because they're so paralyzed by it all. Neither one of those is right or wrong. They just are. And you have to allow yourself a little bit of wiggle room for both of those extremes. I was just feeling a little bit guilty about 2 days ago. I posted about this on Facebook because I thought I was going to get my book written during the quarantine. I thought I was going to play my piano all the time, and that what else I was going to do? Oh, I had a big knitting project that I was going to do. I was going to lose like 500 pounds. All of these different things. None of them have happened. And that's okay. That's okay. So I think, each day we have to pick one thing, not have this to-do list from hell, but, one or two things. I'm going to get this done today, and I'm going to get up at a certain time, and I'm going to, make sure I get outside and get some fresh air. So yeah, pretty basic stuff.
So discipline is one of them, right? Having some kind of a discipline or a set of disciplines or rituals. And another one is a sort of flexibility and permission to be who you are. And the curiosity of like, gee, how interesting it is that I'm not finding myself compelled to do all these things that I thought I was going to do when I finally had time.
Absolutely.
What does that tell us? Like, what does that say? Maybe it wasn't that important in the first place to us.
Yeah.
Maybe what we really crave, because I'm going through the same thing. What I'm finding is, in some ways I'm being productive, and in some ways I am creating discipline and structure, and I do make my bed every morning, and I do walk Woody every day, and some things I've got to do.
Yeah.
I've usually got pants on, and but
I don't.
But at the same time, what I think a lot of people are realizing is what they've been needing isn't necessarily time to get into a new project. Maybe they've just been needing time to just power down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody's exhausted.
Yeah, I think so too. And I know that one of your pet topics is mindfulness. What better time to practice it? I think, and that's part of the problem for some people. Some people just aren't used to being quiet and being alone without anything to do right this minute. And that can be uncomfortable because it's a new skill, right? It's challenging your brain to work a different way, and that's okay.
Well, it's challenging to people who haven't done it, and they're probably doing everything they can to avoid the experience of quietude. Yeah. And it is an invitation to do it. And I think for me, I feel like I've been practicing all my life for this experience, right? I'm fine with what's going on, right? Because as much as I feel compassion for the people who are suffering, I'm really not suffering. I don't feel any kind of longing to be more social than I'm being, or more out there than I'm being, or any of that stuff. I'm really living in a state of acceptance of what is. And so when I look at people who aren't living in a state of acceptance of what is, I think that's just because you've never really practiced the art of stillness. You've never allowed yourself the experience of being still. And so if you do it now, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to feel unfamiliar, and it's going to feel uncomfortable, and you're going to think something's wrong.
Yeah.
But what if nothing's wrong? What if this, global thing? Yes, it's crisis, but if you're into the Bible, you look at Noah and the ark, right? It's that was a crisis then, there's going to be a flood and everybody's getting on this one boat, right? It's kind of like what's going on now, but it was done for a purpose, right? It was done to kind of reinvent, right? If you use that story of Noah and the ark, it was okay, there's a flood coming, there's a flood happening. We're all kind of clustered together. And now the flood is going to go down, and we're going to come back out into a new world, and we're going to be a little bit more compassionate and a little bit more accepting and a little bit more capable of living in close quarters, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like your Noah's Ark analogy, the world is not going to be the same after we get out of our houses. It's just not. I don't think so. Education is going to be different. Business is going to be different. The way we socialize will be different. I see it happening already. And if we can't adapt and change, then we become irrelevant. And as business people, that's a scary thing. As educators, that's a scary thing. And nobody wants to be irrelevant. So I always you won't understand this, but many of your women listeners will. I've always likened it to the pain of childbirth and labor and childbirth. It hurts. It sucks. You scream, you swear. It's not fun. But when you can push through that and get to the other side, and just be in that moment and sit with that discomfort, it's really cool on the other side. And just know that it's temporary, right? This isn't going to last forever.
That's an awesome analogy. And it also, in as much as the experience of it can be excruciating, right? It can be very painful. And yet the degree of pain you're experiencing is in no way indicative of what positive outcome might be, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, and so now the degree of pain that we're experiencing, the globality, the global aspect of this thing, the enormity of it, doesn't take away from the fact that where it's leading us could potentially be a very positive place.
Absolutely. I was just thinking as you were saying that, I mean, the enormity of the pain is overwhelming, of course. If you look at it that way, it's like, oh, if you let your mind start, snowballing with that, it can be very overwhelming and it can cause a lot of anxiety. So one of the things that I learned, I ran a marathon when I turned 30. Having never run at all in my life, one of the things that I learned was that running a marathon wasn't about doing the whole 26.2 miles, especially for someone who's never run around the block. It was about running around the block one time, and that's it. And then the next day, maybe running around 2 times. And, when I got to the longer runs, it was often like, okay, I'm going to get to that tree over there. I'm not even going to worry what's beyond that tree, but I'm going to get to that tree. And then I'll worry about the rest later. And so I think, when we take things in smaller chunks like that, it doesn't freak out our brains as much. It doesn't freak out that, fight or flight thing in our amygdala that makes us, want to run away from it. So our brain is much more willing to accept small steps than these huge, like overwhelming things. So, so maybe breaking down, we know here in Vermont, we're going to be in quarantine until May 15th. So, maybe breaking down small goals for each day, something that's not overwhelming. I mean, today I'm going to go outside and, walk to the end of my street and back. No big deal. I could do that. Whatever it is for you, that's not too much of a big deal. And then, gradually adding to it can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's a great concept. It definitely, like you said, it doesn't freak out the amygdala. It doesn't get you into this state, because the opposite of that is what most people do whenever they face crisis, which is to catastrophize.
Yes.
They see the very end, the end result of this thing, and they see it in the worst possible way. So as I embark on this project, all I can see is hideous outcomes. And if I'm focusing as hideous outcomes, I mean, it's the law of attraction. Like what I focus on is what I end up with. So if I'm going to suffer, I'll be suffering the entire time.
Yeah.
But if
trust me, I totally get that. I'm like, we've talked about this before. I grew up with just call me Ann Anxiety. That is who I was growing up. I was the most anxious, oversensitive kid in the world. And, and I've worked on it really hard as an adult. I've gone to therapy, I've done meditation, I pray, I walk, I do all kinds of things. It's not easy, and it's all practice. But I can honestly say that I have anxiety, but anxiety doesn't have me. But every once in a while, I can feel it like, and I have to really work to not let that happen.
I could totally relate to that. I mean, you're right. Like, at least from my experience, the feeling of anxiety has not disappeared from my life. I still experience that, but it doesn't have me. It's like, that's just something, I've changed my relationship with it. It's just something to see, something to endure, something to embrace sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It serves a purpose, right?
Yeah. That's intense. That's great. The other piece of that I find fascinating is, like, I had a one of these virtual lives yesterday with an old friend of mine, Karen Richmond, who I know from high school, who is now like a Hollywood actress. She was, if you remember the new Gidget, she was Gidget.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. So she and I reconnected and had this wonderful conversation, and she had been reading my newest book, in which I talk a little bit about the pain of growing up and feeling like a dork and feeling left out. And she said, I was reading your book, and she said, I had no idea that you felt that way back then. She said, that's not the way you came across to me at all. right? You were, smart, you were interesting, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, how is it possible to have such stuff going on inside of you that's so disparate from what's going on outside of you?
Yeah.
I think that's a really useful lesson for us all, is like, just because it feels real doesn't mean it's real. And just because you feel like you're unacceptable doesn't mean you're unacceptable. And just because you feel like life is hopeless doesn't mean life is hopeless.
Right. Feelings are not reality.
Yeah.
Emotions are not reality. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big get. And I think that's why I love having these conversations with people like you, because it's not like Pollyanna. It's not like I'm talking to somebody who's never experienced pain. You and I both have been, we've had our share, but I think there's wisdom that comes from that, or tolerance, or perspective, or something.
Resilience.
Resilience. And if anybody can get, a little bit of that from this, that's awesome.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
So quick plug and also simultaneous introduction for you to this. This is my new book.
Cool.
Yeah. It's called Bulletproof. What if everything that bugged you, blocked you, or brought you down didn't? Kind of like our conversation.
Yes.
And for those of you watching, by the way, if you go to bestofsteve.com, you could get a digital download of the first chapter of that book. So head on over and grab that. And what could people do if they want to know more about you?
They can follow me on social media. I'm on all the major platforms. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I just got on TikTok, even though I don't understand it.
I don't understand most of them.
Or they can go to my website at annzuccardy.com, ANNZUCCARDY.com, which needs updating desperately. So,
okay, so better
just
on
my
social
disclaimer.
media. Okay, that's awesome. Well, any final words? Anything you'd like to leave everyone with, or?
I can't think of anything, except the thing that keeps popping into my mind is, what's one small thing that you can do today that's just a wee bit outside of the comfort zone? Find that one thing, write it down, and do it.
That's awesome. I think that's great advice. Okay, I'm gonna cut the record here, cut the stream, but stay with me for a moment.
Okay.
See you guys.